Whoops.
Hi, guys.
Hello. Wowza.
As you can see, we're having some technical difficulties. Curtis is still learning all the systems, and I have been locked out of the systems. And you'll notice that Dan is not here, so y'all get just us. Aren't y'all lucky?
Very lucky. You know, you go from one bald head to another.
You have some.
Some, not a lot. Not a lot. So how was your week?
My week is actually pretty good. Although I deep cleaned my house. I rage cleaned my house.
Rage cleaned?
Rage cleaned my house.
What does that look like?
Where I act like a little mini you know how in Over the Hedge, Hammy, I'm a scary squirrel, rabbit squirrel. That was me running around and cleaning my house. My children annoyed me. I shut the Wi-Fi off because they were rushing through their chores in order to go play video games again. I confiscated my eldest's phone and I turned the Wi-Fi off, and you should have seen the look of horror on their faces. They're like, wait, the internet's not working. Why is the internet not working? The battery says it's charged. I'm like, yes, I know. I turned the internet off. You can do that? Yes, I can. Go do your laundry. And then I made the mistake of going upstairs in their rooms.
Was it your mistake or was it theirs?
It was their mistake for letting their rooms get that disgusting.
That doesn't surprise me at all. I mean, they're boys. I mean, have you ever smelled the middle school locker room? It's worse than the high school locker room.
Yeah, but still. I would normally allow, like, if it's just messy, that I can deal with. Clothes all over the floor, that I can deal with. It's when you have rotting food shoved up in your closet or behind your bed because they've snuck candy upstairs or food upstairs. That's where I draw the line.
So it's funny you should mention cleaning. Jamie said to me Saturday morning, hey, I wanted to talk to you about the Shark vacuum. She's got this very, very expensive Shark vacuum because she is very into cleaning herself. And then suddenly it's like, yeah, it took a crap. And I'm like, what? You mean that $500 piece of machinery that you insisted on having took a crap? She goes, yeah. Me and our oldest are going into town, and I'm going to purchase another one. I'm like, good thing our finances are separate, I'll tell you. Because she went in and she purchased another one. But get this, she also purchased a second one as well. Now, here's the funny part. So the funny part is she found this Shark vacuum that's being discontinued. It's not the lift away, but it's another one that she purchased on sale and got it on sale because it was on clearance or whatever. Then she proceeds to buy the Shark Auto one that maps out the house and everything to go after like the pet hair. And I'm like, and she's like, well, between the price of that and the other one was still less than the one, the main one that she would have paid to replace it with. And I was like, your money, girl, your money. So
now, see, I have a Shark vacuum, and when it stopped working, I took that thing all the way apart, found the problem, put it back together.
Yeah.
Because I was not going to pay another $300 for a vacuum that I bought a year ago.
Yeah, I see. The thing is we have, so I'm married to a cat lady. She has 13 cats, and we have 2 dogs. And one of them's a long-haired dog. So
I have a husky. I have tufts of fur that walk through my house.
Yeah. The one dog, He's like a herding mutt. He's got 7 different herding breeds bred into him. He grows this really thick winter coat. And then when it's spring, and then we have this one particular cat that pulls out his tufts of hair every 6 weeks. All over the place. It's great. So we had an interesting exchange yesterday over text message. What's involved? But you had this one wild idea that I loved. And what was it?
That we are going to discuss the myth, or that feminists think that's a myth, about how misandry is not as damaging or dangerous as misogyny. And if misandry does exist, which according to most of these women, it doesn't, it is only as a result of overt misogyny. Because here in the West, women can't do things.
Is it so?
I keep asking them every time they say all the things men can do that women can't. I was like, name one right, not a privilege, a right that men or women don't have that men do, and they can never do it. And everything they name is always a privilege. And one of the stupidest privileges is, well, men can walk around in the middle of the night. And I'm like, okay, bitch, first of all, we're not on TikTok. I can swear now. So first of all, I've gone walking around my neighborhood at 2 o'clock in the morning because I'm a natural night owl and I find solace in the dark rather than daytime. Mm-hmm. But that's my neighborhood. I'm also armed, so I have nothing to fear except the wild hogs, and even then I'll shoot it. There is a big difference between walking around your neighborhood at 2 o'clock in the morning and stumbling down an alley blind drunk when the bars have closed in a sketchy part of town. And I hate to break it to you, but even then, even in that scenario, the woman is still statistically safer than the man.
Yes.
But still, what is this obsession with wanting to, go to the sketchy part of town in the middle of the night, and that's your litmus test for safety? And I'm like, look, just because you're really bad at risk assessment does not mean that all men are predators.
Right. I mean, if you were to walk around this little small town here in Iowa, I mean, we don't even have 1,400 people, but I guarantee you, if someone decides to attack someone, they're likely going to get tagged from one of the neighbors, because that's how close-knit the community is. So I like living in a small podunk town. If my kids are out getting in trouble, I get a phone call. Hey, Oliver's doing this. And I'm like, okay. 2-minute response time anywhere in the town.
See, that's nice. I live on the edge of a really big city, so we don't have that.
But what you do have is that ability to carry.
Yes, I do.
That is nice, because here we have it. It's great. Nobody screws with anybody really because of that.
So yeah, that's what I thought we would talk about today. We would talk about this perpetuating myth that I see going around more and more often. It keeps popping up on my For You page. Of course, the reason why it keeps popping up on my For You page is, in order to do my due diligence as a advocate for men, I have to actually listen to what the arguments of the other side are so that I can dismantle them. Right. Unfortunately, that means letting my brain dribble out my ears on a routine basis while I listen to the logic of these women who, they say they're using logic. Like, it's common sense. Everyone knows that. It's like, everyone doesn't know that, sweetheart Samantha, my dear darling Clementine, because if women were actually first of all, have you ever tried to tell a whole bunch of women what to do? We are not that easy to impress.
Video out there where the guy starts, listen, women, and then the guy cuts in, they don't do that. I'm like, come on.
So first of all, it's not that easy to oppress women as an individual male. Like, yes, if you have a government or a system like that, but then you also have to remember that those kinds of systems historically, and I always point this out, I said historically, women have always had more power than a lot of modern feminists, because they've rewritten history, think they do. They're like, well, the British, did all of this in the 1800s. I said, yes. And do you know who was in charge of the British Empire in the 1860s? I'll give you a hint. Queen Victoria. The same thing is true under Isabella I of Castile. The same is true under Elizabeth I of England, Mary Queen of Scots. I mean, have been plenty. It's the system itself that is oppressive, and it doesn't matter who's driving the bitch. It's still going to steamroll over everybody.
Yes.
But this myth that misogyny or misandry only exists because of all this rampant misogyny, like you and I were talking about, I keep asking them, give me an example of misogyny, and they name the stupidest stuff. Well, I can't go to a gym without getting looked at because you're wearing yoga pants that look like they have been spray painted on. The ones that have the stuff in the back, like the ruching in the back that make it look like they're up your ass crack. And you're wearing like a bikini top, which has no support whatsoever. Of course, you don't need it because they're fake. And you're doing like Romanian deadlifts with your butt out like Kim Kardashian. Yeah, you're going to get looked at probably. And most of the guys that are looking at you are probably not thinking, damn, I want to tap that. They're probably thinking your form is horrible. Because that's what I think when I go to the gym and I see girls like that. They're like, well, I'm just there to work out. Well, then wear sweatpants and a sweatshirt or an oversized t-shirt. That's what I wear when I work out because I am self-conscious. But you can't paint yourself neon pink, go to a large area, and you're basically daring men to look at you. And then when they do look at you, which is what you wanted, you can't convince me otherwise, then you scream, oh my God, that's misogyny. I don't like being objectified. But you did it to yourself. Yeah. And those are the examples that they give me when I ask them for examples of overt misogyny. Or they'll give me a historic example that doesn't apply anymore. They're like, well, in the 1800s, women weren't allowed to do this. And I go, I hate to break it to you, but in the 1800s, most people weren't allowed to do anything unless you were royal or rich. Your life was pretty much horrible.
Yeah, I would say that's true. It wasn't until the 1870s, post-Civil War, that the states actually had to abide by the U.S. Constitution and its amendments, because if not for the 13th and the 14th Amendment, Chief Justice John Marshall had basically deteriorated the Bill of Rights as not being enforceable to the states. The states didn't have to enforce them. And then following the institution of the 14th Amendment, they had to.
And it was even a slow progress. Then I argue that around the time of the Industrial Revolution, so the 1880s and 90s, is when we began to see true change. But up until then, like I said, unless you were royal or rich, life sucked for pretty much everybody. Life sucked in unique ways for men. Life sucked in unique ways for women, for children. And even if you were royal or rich, life still sucked. You could still get sent off for marriage to appease your family. And that was true of male and female. Everyone always says, oh, so-and-so was forced to marry a man twice her age for her family's prospect. Yes, and lots of men were forced to marry bitter, harpy shrews, too, for their families. So, I mean, it went both ways.
You're not lying.
And I also will tell them, I said, look, I asked for examples of misogyny now, not examples of misogyny then. Not only that, but a lot of the examples of misogyny, they only look like misogyny to us because we're judging the past based on today's morals. And not only that, but a lot of today's conveniences, like the medical field. Women were often denied medical care, not necessarily because they were women, but because the doctors didn't know what to do with them and didn't want to hurt them. I read one case of a gentleman in England, a doctor, who asked for women who would be willing to basically let him observe them in various different states so that he could learn about the female body, because they've been using male cadavers to do whatever they wanted for centuries, right?
Right.
Or they've been watching men when they're at the gym or in war, or, you know, physicians have been observing the male physique for quite some time, but they didn't have that with women. So this country doctor asked if he could, you know, observe them. One of them was breastfeeding, and every single woman said no. Well, how can a doctor learn so that he can administer medicine if he doesn't know what he's doing?
Yes. And I can tell you this, with all of the kids I've had, you know, their breastfeeding is one of those things where it can make or break a kid, and it can make or break the relationship. And it also contributes highly if it's not done correctly or properly. It can often send women into postpartum depression very quickly too.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's important to understand how all of this development works.
So this particular doctor he wouldn't treat women, not because he had something against women, but because they knew that the treatments that work on men wouldn't necessarily work on certain female ailments. And we look at that, or feminist people with who are getting a degree in, you know, feminist dance theory or underwater basket weaving or whatever they do nowadays, look at this and go, well, that's obviously misogyny. Well, he wouldn't treat her because she was a woman. Was it because he just hates women, or is it because he didn't know what he was doing? I mean, would you ask a airplane mechanic to take apart your automobile? I mean, there's a chance he might get it right, but I'm telling you now, the engine on an F-35 looks vastly different from my Ford Explorer. And you wouldn't put jet fuel in your gas tank in your car now, would you?
No, you'd put petrol, gasoline. Yeah, you wouldn't put JP7 or JP8 in it.
No,
no,
you would not. So a lot of what historically is today viewed as misogyny is not necessarily misogyny. It's a lack of knowledge, or a lack of you can't know what you can't know.
Right.
And back then, especially in the medical field, there were no x-rays. There were no ways, there were no little cameras on the end of a scope for us to stick in anything. The only thing you had to judge with was observation.
Mm-hmm.
And if you are not allowed to observe the female sex to see how their bodies work, well, then that's another thing that people always say is, well, in the past, women were constantly diagnosed for things that weren't, or they were diagnosed wrong, or the treatment plan was wrong. So, yes, because all they had to observe were male bodies. And so I hate to break it to you, but men and women are in fact different. You know, a man has a pain down here. It might be, his appendix might be erupting. He might have kidney stones or some other kidney problem. If a woman has pain down here, it may be her ovaries. Guess what? Men don't have those.
No. Mm-mm. And who's to say that, if you go in and you're like, well, wait a minute, I thought they had appendicitis, but their appendix is perfectly healthy now that I've moved in and examined it. What could it possibly be?
So, I mean, there was, so one of the I was reading a book actually about all these horrible things that have happened to women in the medical field in the past. One of them was appendicitis. They would go in to get their appendix removed. Turns out their appendix was perfectly healthy, and then they died of ovarian cancer. But this was in the late 1800s when medical knowledge was. They're like, how could they not know? And I'm like, you mean before X-rays were a thing, and the only way to see inside of a human body was to open up a cadaver? You mean that?
Well, it was either that, and then the X-rays, the primitive X-rays. When we say primitive, I mean it was 1920s, 30s, 40s. They used an inordinate amount of radiation to do so. So, I mean, and the other thing was, who was it? It was Alexander Graham Bell had a metal detecting device with President Garfield, and he couldn't find the bullet. Well, turns out President Garfield was laying on a spring-filled mattress, and it screwed everything up.
So yeah, that's how we got on this topic, or how I chose this topic. But what do you think about this topic? Do you think that there are probably, am I right, or am I?
No, I think you're right on the target. Okay, so Mark Green, he's a guy that writes for Medium. He wrote the book Remaking Manhood. And it's really interesting because he takes a very, I would say, feministic view of masculinity. And he discusses in a particular Medium article, misogyny versus misandry. And he makes the case that misogyny is far worse than misandry, and based on the historical context, much like you're talking about now. And I go, So when I think about modern misogyny and modern misandry, and here's my issue with all of it. How many of the female population in the United States was alive when the 19th Amendment was passed?
Not very many.
Now, this kind of goes more and more in line with everything that I'm seeing now is, a lot of things are talked about with controversial topics that, the sins of our
forebears.
Yes. Hey, guess what? It's 2025. And I did not have anything to do with this. So why am I paying for the sins of those folks? Okay. Then it gets really interesting because we talk about modern misogyny. Every time I look at a case, like a family law case, I got to be honest. Every time I turn around, it just seems like the guy wants to be done. He wants to walk away. Doesn't want to sit there, and he doesn't want to perpetuate the problem. He only wants what's fair most of the time. We're talking 95%+ of these cases that I've seen. They only want what's fair. Now I'll tell you that those lone 5%, they're awful. But those few bad apples, those are the ones that people grab onto. And what's interesting is in misandry, in those same 95% of those cases, those women latch on to what they know they can get. And that's not what they're entitled to. So that's the other interesting component there when I look at it and go, boy, you guys know how to burn down the house. Come on, you're throwing out the baby with the bathwater at that point.
So I actually argue that misandry is worse in today's society than misogyny. And this is why, because misogyny, when it is found, there's a true case of misogyny, or even when someone thinks there's a case of misogyny, People are tarred and feathered in the court of opinion. People will fight it tooth and nail. Everyone rises up to fight against it. Misandry is insidious. The reason misandry is insidious is because it's literally everywhere, and it's normalized.
Correct.
They have done, I don't know how many videos, social experiments, where it's two actors in a crowded area. The man is beating on the woman. Everyone stops him. You switch it around and the woman's beating on the man. A crowd gathers to cheer her on about how much she deserves it. That's misandry.
Or they won't even,
they won't even do anything.
Yeah.
And the way that we portray men in media as being bumbling idiots, that is I would say a light version of misandry, because misandry is a prejudice or hatred towards men for being men. I would say it's female chauvinism, but it's misandry adjacent, I guess.
Yeah, it's almost akin to I would say that's akin to when you take like I don't know, like for instance, the Andy Griffith Show, and the guy who played Gomer Pyle was the mechanic in that movie or in that show, and he has I don't know, Andy, and he has that
stereotypes,
right? That deep Southern draw. Why do we have to associate that with lower intelligence and stuff like it doesn't compute down, does it?
I have met some very intelligent people that talk slow. In fact, one of my favorite lines from Sweet Home Alabama is, "Just because I talk slow, don't make me stupid." Right. And I've also I've also talked to people who talk very quickly, who sound very articulate. They sound articulate. They're dumber than a box of rocks. And also, a degree doesn't necessarily, or articulation or a degree doesn't necessarily make you intelligent. You can have a law degree and not know how to tie your shoes. Einstein notoriously was very brilliant in certain mathematic fields, but he habitually forgot to eat.
Well, in the very first, what was it? It was Star Wars: The Phantom Menace. Qui-Gon Jinn says to Jar Jar Binks, "The ability to speak does not denote intelligence.
Does not make you intelligent."
Yes.
I speak. The ability to speak does not make you intelligent. Stop being racist against rocks. No. So yeah, I mean,
the reason why I struggle with this, coming from especially coming from the point of view of trying to be completely fair towards women on this one. The reason I'm having a hard time with it is because Ruth Bader Ginsburg. We're talking about a gender equality champion. Gender equality champion, woman, everything. In fact, when she was on her deathbed and they asked her in an interview that, because she pretty much knew that Trump was going to get elected, her fear, no, it was when Trump was going to be ousted. And she had a good sense that Trump wasn't going to be reelected that won the 2020 election. It was, her worry was the pendulum would swing back too far the other way. And the idea of gender equality is there's two genders that need to be treated equally here.
To the best of your ability.
Now, does that equality look the same? No, not by a long shot. I've got capabilities that you're not capable of, and you've got capabilities that I'm not capable of.
It needs to be comparable equality. And when I tried to explain this to someone once, they're like, "What do you mean a comparable equality?" I'm like, okay, men and women are exactly the same, right? We're going to pretend that, right? They're all equal. And she goes, "Yes." I go, "Okay, so we're going to and I had to use small numbers. I said, "Okay, we're going to do $3 million for breast cancer services and awareness for women, and $300 million for breast cancer awareness for men." She goes, "Well, that's stupid." I go, "Yes, it is." You know what would be comparable equality? An equal amount for breast cancer and an equal amount for prostate cancer. because that's the equitable thing that men face. And she goes,
Right.
okay, I see your point. I'm like, yes, I won.
One person at a time.
One person at a time. And the same thing with another example that women always use for a proof that misogyny still exists is the supposed, the women are allowed in certain fields like STEM.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, the only way to ensure true equality, which is not necessarily always a good thing. I mean, I'm pretty sure that the communist China, they were all equal. They were all equally miserable, but they
Mm-hmm.
were all equal. The only way to make things even 50-50 split, which is what you are claiming for. You claim that the only way you can see that women are being treated equally is if in any given field, like let's take petroleum engineering, there's 50% men and 50% women. Do you know the only way to do that? She goes, how? And I go, oppression. Because you have to remove a woman's choice to choose her major. No one is holding a gun to your head in the college administration office saying you have to choose early childhood education when you could be choosing petroleum engineering, which pays a lot more than early childhood education. The only way to ensure the equality that you want equality of outcome, which is different than equality of opportunity. That's a Thomas Sowell quote. And that's your version of equality, but your version of equality is not equal. In fact, your version of equality is actually oppression, and it's sending women backwards rather than forward because you have a cognitive dissonance, or you see a disparity and you automatically jump to it must be because
I don't even know if I want to ask Houston that question.
Lesbian dance theory.
No, I don't know if I want to touch it.
Well, all feminists are lesbians. Don't you know that? Because they wouldn't touch a man if their life depended on it. Even men are mean. We're not on TikTok. I can get away with it. I can be even more of a problem than I already am.
So what's interesting is in the taking Thomas Sowell's quote, right? There's plenty of opportunity here, right? Right. Mm-hmm. So when you're given the opportunity to thrive, to succeed, not just survive, it's my understanding, because our good friend Warren Farrell has shown pretty consistently that all things being equal, when they're single, no family to care for, they make 118% of what men make in the same conditions with the same opportunities and everything. And that's an interesting thing that really plays on this really strongly. And let's take a shot at Mark Green on the historical context, and I'll piggyback on you. What pirate in all of history actually lived their entire life out basically being a pirate and being very successful in doing so?
I can think of two. I can think of Mistress Ching from China. Mm-hmm. And then I can think of Anne Bonny.
What about Grace O'Malley?
Oh, I forgot about her.
Think about that. Because she dealt very heavily with the Queen of England, Queen Elizabeth. And, it's very interesting to me that she was able to walk in, negotiate. Her father, at that time, it was seen as a bad omen or bad luck to have a girl or a woman on the boat, on the ship, right? And he let her on because she could outperform her brother. It was interesting.
But she could outperform her brother, so she was allowed to stay. The problem nowadays is that I've actually seen, so I have my brother-in-law has a contracting business. My uncle, whom I was named after, also has a contracting business. And he won't hire women because he does roofing. And it's not that he doesn't like women. It's that a woman cannot walk up a ladder sideways carrying 2 bags or 3 bags of shingles.
Mm-hmm.
Men can. And he tells everyone, said, look, you want me to hire you? This is the test you have to complete. It's the same. I was hearing someone complain. I went up to visit Mr. Squirrel for lunch the other day, and we were out at the park. And there were service, we call them servicemen, even though they were women, eating lunch next to us. And they were complaining about their physical standards and how, oh, well, it's not fair. And I was like, okay, basic military training, this is my pet peeve, should be equal across the board because it's basic military training. Now, if you get into specialized fields, by all means, but you have to be able to do the job. So she was complaining that she doesn't have enough time to run the mile. Eric has to run the mile in, I think, under 15 minutes because he's now over the age of 35 and his knees are
popcorn.
He sounds like a bowl of Rice Krispie treats when he gets up and down. But before that, it was under 12 minutes. That was the male standard, at least in the Air Force, was under a 12-minute mile. The females have 15 minutes. Now, I have asthma like no one's business. My parents were 2-pack-a-day smokers, and I grew up in their house. My lungs are horrible. Even though I haven't been in that environment for a long time, I was supposed to outgrow my childhood asthma. I never have. Even I can run a mile in the 12 minutes. So if I can do it, and I'm not even in the Air Force, what are y'all's ladies' excuses? Like, it's basic training. If you want to be treated the same as your male counterpart soldiers, you have to be willing to do the same.
So that's the interesting thing. So when I was in the first group, the 17 to 21, had to run 2 miles in 15:54. Now, then it got to like 16 minutes after that, and then it was 16:36, and then it was 17, and then 17:42 every 4 years after that. And I think it like capped at like 17 something, right? As the minimum. So, like, to me, I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility at all. And I'll tell you this. There are my brother-in-law, his girlfriend, she's Jamie's age, 47. She can lift and she can do calisthenics like nobody's business. And she's one strong girl. Let me tell you. There's no reason why those standards can't exist. And even now within the Army, they have the it's called the ACE. What is it? The ACFT instead of the APFT. Used to be the Army Physical Fitness Test. It's now the Army Combat Fitness Test, where it's now job specific. So the infantry has their own requirements. The artillery has their own requirements. The CAPS, the cavalry has their own requirements. Combat service support has their own requirements. Like medics, don't you think it'd be really important to be, I don't know, be able to carry weight? And you got to be able to carry a lot of weight because, I don't know, would you want to carry a guy like me off the battlefield? No.
Well, it's the same with firefighters. I was hearing a woman complain that it's misogyny that's keeping women out of firefighting. It's like, look, if you can't fireman carry a man out of the house because his house is on fire, then you shouldn't be a firefighter. You know what her response is? Well, he shouldn't have caught his house on fire. I wanted so badly to reach through my phone and like slap her or strangle her because what is wrong with you? And these are the examples that women give of proof that there's misogyny in the world or in the West. There is absolutely misogyny out there, but it's not in the West.
No, I mean,
and it's not systemic. There might be individual misogynists, but
case in point, they could go to Iran.
They could, but they won't.
No. I mean, even in Saudi Arabia, it's still pretty doggone bad. But, to this end, I think that we're on the same page as far as like what constitutes equally is very different, because it's kind of like, okay, so let's say we're doing a divorce, and let's say that the male is the breadwinner and the mom is the caretaker or the caregiver. Okay, that's fine. Here's the way that I view it. The way that I view it is it's still 50-50 shared parenting. And since you guys accumulated that wealth of assets over the course of your marriage, you're still splitting that all in 50-50. So you're doing all of that. You better get out of here. So you cover all of that very clearly. But the reason why we split the wealth 50-50 is because that wife who was the caregiver, while the father was being the breadwinner, she was there managing the home front so he could build that empire. Well, she had a hand in it. It should be split 50-50. This that's akin to the same thing what we're talking about here. You know what? Misandry and misogyny. Sorry, fellas. Sorry, women. It's not kosher. It's not good. It's not cool. Shouldn't do it.
But I always argue that it's exactly the same type. It's equally as bad. And it's the same side of the disgusting coin. Right. Because if women want to sit there and claim that women can do anything that men can do, that includes, but is not limited to, being horrible shit people. And I've watched it, and it starts young. I've seen adult women laugh because the little boy at the pool fell down and scraped his knee. Mm-hmm. If that was a little girl and the men were laughing, they would be shamed out of the pool. Right. They would be chased out by the mob. It's the most egregious form of making misogyny that I've ever seen was at my husband's first posting in Oklahoma City at Tinker Air Force Base. They had he was on the AWAC, and they were deployed to the sandbox from hell. I didn't actually know where they were. I know that the base was in the United Arab Emirates somewhere, but and
those AWACs, they're always in the air.
So she messed up. She was the comm operator, and she didn't do something. And so the combat ready unit, whatever planes were in the area, missed their mark. They had bad intel because they were missing, and they had to abort their mission. Her ass gets pulled into the commanders to get reprimanded. Rightfully so. She fucked up. When they get back from deployment, his ass is in sensitivity training because he shouldn't have talked to her like that. And I'm sitting there going, you're either a soldier or you're a woman. You can't be both. Well, you can be both, but you have to be a soldier first. In this case, an airman. And you messed up. And if you had been male, your ass would have been handed to you the same way. You can either be treated as an equal or you can be treated as a woman. Pick one. And I see so many women who are so desperate for misandry or misogyny because they want to believe they're oppressed, because it gives them something to fight against, that they manufacture it. Like in that instance, he was not being a misogynist. He was treating her like a soldier. You fucked up. We had to abort the entire exercise in a combat zone, an active one, because you fucked up. That to me is reprimand worthy. That to me is like dishonorable discharge worthy, but that's just me. And she got, but when she got back, his ass was in sensitivity training, and the I know it's not a black mark, but the black mark was taken off her record. So she can go do it again and another post somewhere else. And that's the kind of example I get that women give me when I ask for examples of misogyny. They either are ones that have been created out of thin air, or they're ones where it's an example of, I don't have this privilege, therefore men hate women. Like when we talk about the rights thing. We can go slightly more political this time. When we're talking about the last election, they completely made the whole election about abortion issue.
Yes.
Well, one side did, and that was what a lot of it was. And which you still had a right to do that because it was just kicked back to the states, which actually gives you more power to decide than at the federal level. But like, see, this is what's happening. We're not allowed to do this anymore. Therefore, all the men in the world hate us, and our country is so misogynistic. I'm like, sweetheart, first of all, there's like a million different forms of birth control out there. If you are ARD, or we're not on TikTok, if you're raped, you can go to the hospital and they'll scrape you out, so there's no possibility of conception. You don't even have to tell them anything. They're required to do it in almost every emergency room. They're required to do it. And you have all these different options to you. In fact, one of them is you have a right to swallow. But you have all these options for you. They're just taking away one option. And they're actually not taking it away completely, because depending on what state you're in, you can have it, right? That's supposed to be the proof. What about all of the laws against... See, to me... You see this, right?
Yeah.
Well, right back at you, clever girl. What about teaching men not to rape women? Because men statistically rape, or women statistically rape men just as often as men rape women. Did you know that? When you adjust the federal definition of rape to include made to penetrate, it shows that women rape men at equal rates that men rape women.
It's still not good. And it's not any different than what we're talking about right now with comparing misogyny and misandry. And she said earlier that misandry is not real. Well, I hate to tell you, but you've never been in a family court situation then? Or what? Because here's the interesting thing. When we go into family court and we compare the statistics, 2020, when the child support statistics came out, so 83% of mothers were the primary caregivers of kids. Now, here's the interesting thing. Primary care, when 73% of male fathers who are the non-custodial parents paid their child support in full and on time in 2020. So here's...
did you know that the majority of those victims of those crimes are other men? So you need to check your stats, girl, because they're really bad. This must be that girl math.
I don't know.
She's on YouTube. We can't block her. But this right here, that right there that stat you came up, that's misandry.
So here's the interesting thing. 73% of men who are the non-custodial parents pay their child support in full and on time in 2020 for the entire year. So go to single mother non-custodial parents, when the mother is the non-custodial parent, 40% of the time in full and on time. Here's the other thing. The other thing of this, Lindsay, is the average child support amount for those men was $1,200 a month. What do you think the average child support amount was for women?
It's like 700 something.
It was less than 500. It was like 480 something. Isn't that wild? That's what I mean. It's just crazy to me.
No, by all means, stay. You might learn something. She's saying we can tell her to go. We actually like trolls like you. Y'all are fun. It's like playing with your food.
Look.
I'm going to.
Here's what I'll tell you. Here's what I'll tell you. If she was in the military, it certainly wasn't the Army, and she certainly wasn't NCO, because the first sentence in the NCO creed is no one is more professional than I, and she's clearly not that professional. So
this is my disclaimer for all of those people who always love to say that I hate women. Holding women accountable. See, the male standard up here. I love women so much that I hold women to the same standard I hold men. I'm not going to lower the bar for us. I'm going to hold us to the same standard.
Men hold themselves accountable.
And yes, so me holding women accountable for, not all women. Shitty women.
Men accountable. We've been holding men accountable. She doesn't know the work. She doesn't know the work that we've done, has she?
No.
She's not been here at all. How many times? Okay, how many men do you think I probably dropped in court cases because they were misbehaving and they were being dicks? Over 100. There's been times where we picked up the women in our court cases just because the men have been so bad.
Men are constantly held accountable.
Yes, they are.
Men are held accountable by men and society as a whole. Women are not held accountable by society, and we're not held accountable by other women. Case in point, I'm attempting to hold not all women, just badly behaved ones, accountable, and your response is to call me a pick-me, which is misogyny, by the way, because you have reduced my cognitive ability, my sole driving force for that to please men. So there's an actual example of real misogyny in today's society, but it's not being perpetuated by men, it's being perpetuated by women. We're not talking about the election. Why do you have to bring,
we don't care about Trump.
We don't care about Trump. I hate to break it to you, sweetie, but both sides of the aisle pretty much hate. Again, pick me, girl. Pick me? That's a misogynistic dog whistle, because you have reduced my sole reasoning for doing what I do to try and please men.
I don't know.
So I know y'all are all probably going to all say we shouldn't have interacted with her. We actually enjoy interacting with people like that because they prove our point, number one.
Yeah, that's the interesting thing. It's kind of like the old adage is if you give a person enough rope, they'll just hang themselves, right? The thing is like, I'm not, like, to Steve's point, what do we care? Trump's responsible for Trump. I'm not getting in the way of Donnie Boy. You know what? He's accountable to himself. I don't have to contend with him. He doesn't live in my house. Here's the other thing I'll tell you. If he wants to take on the consequences of his actions and he knows that there are going to be consequences, that's on him, right? So I don't, like, how do you access a person that's not easily accessible? There's a totally different thing here. We're talking about something you can't access but every 4 years at the ballot box. I'm beyond that. I don't need to. You know what? I'll go to the ballot box just like every other American. But as far as we're talking about here, right here, right now, not worried about it.
She got banned, but I didn't ban her.
Did.
You did?
Uh-huh. It was becoming to the point where it was.
Because Curtis banned her. It's okay. We got what we needed out of her. She was a useful tool.
Yeah.
A useful idiot, I believe is the term.
I'm not worried about it. It got to the point where it's distracting and it was holding up progress. Because really and truthfully, why we're here is we're here to compare and contrast the issues. The issues are misandry and misogyny right now. And That historical context of Grace O'Malley, man, she was a badass.
Grace O'Malley was badass. The Mistress Ching in China, just South China Sea. She had, by the time she was done, she died wealthy. She was a peasant woman. She died wealthy. She died half blind. And she didn't just have one ship. She had a whole armada of people working for her. So, I mean, this idea that women have been held back by misogyny throughout history, that is looking at history through our modern lens. There has been a lot of reasons why women, like, they're like, well, women were stuck in the home. That was to keep them oppressed. They couldn't let them go to war. Do you know why women were historically spared the realities of war? Because without women, there are no more children. And without more children, guess what? The species dies. So it wasn't that we were prevented from going to war because we were weak and fragile. We were prevented from going to war because we were precious and worth protecting. There's a difference. Meanwhile, men have been expendable this whole time, including but not limited to many kings who were on the battlefield right alongside their soldiers, while the queens were ruling in their stead in regencies at home. So that is something that everyone always overlooks. They look at history, look through a modern lens.
Right. It lacks context and it lacks the actual facts. All of the facts.
All of the facts. And like the song, which I hate that I like this song. From a musical standpoint, the Too Much Labor song, Paris Paulmore, you make me do too much labor. I found an instrumental version of it that I listen to all the time because it's a really catchy tune. But if you actually stop and listen to the lyrics, I despise them. I despise them because she paints the picture that women just were shackled in the kitchen all day. I was like, no, back then, again, you're thinking of a woman's job in the 1800s and before, running a household. So many women think of it as a woman now. I run a household, but I have these wonderful things called a dishwasher, a washing machine, and a dryer. I have all these I have a vacuum. I have all these things that do the labor for me. Carpet shampoo. I have all these things that do the actual physical labor for me. 100 years ago, or not 100, 200, 300 years ago, keeping house was a laborious from sunup to sundown job. So the woman kept the house. She was on her knees scrubbing. She was beating out carpets. You would do it for a week. You'd have chore, like each day would be a certain big chore. And then once you got to the end of the week, guess what? You got to do it all over again. While the men were out doing more labor. And in some cases, depending on how far back you go, like when serfdom was a thing, the women were out in the field right alongside the men with the baby strapped to them. So this idea that women have not contributed or not been alongside their men this whole time, or they've been chained to like the kitchen stove, is a fantasy. And I'm starting to believe it is a desirable fantasy given how much of it features in fan fiction and female targeted romance novels.
I just don't understand it because it goes along with this trend, right? That all of a sudden, well, I mean, James Sixton was talking about it last week where it seems that people are just getting bored in their marriages. And 9 times, well, it wasn't 9 times, it was 7 times out of 10. It would be that the wife had just gotten bored with her marriage. Nobody had been adulterous or anything, but she was just bored with it. She wanted something different. And it was very odd to me. And another thing was, I think I sent you the Instagram reel where James Sexton says to Andrew Huberman, he says he's done hundreds, if not thousands, of prenups. And he says he can only think of 5 people out of all the prenups that he's ever done that he's actually divorced. That came back and got a divorce. 5. Like, whoa. He says he does 2 to 3 a week. Even if you were to do 2 a week, and he's been an attorney for 25 plus years. Holy buckets. Like, that's an insane, that's less than 1%. If you have a prenup and you show that you're committed to the relationship, right? And then all of a sudden, it's not a matter of half in or half out, right? You're all in or you're all out. You're either going to commit. You're going to commit a lifetime's worth of wealth to this relationship, to this marriage. It shows that you have the fortitude to be able to last. Okay, that's an indicator to me that says, ooh, you're willing to commit to that to me? You're willing to sign over all of it if you, okay, let's go. And the other thing is he often hears this misconception as he explains it, that having a prenup is already predisposing you to divorce. It's kind of like a beware of dog sign. Is your dog, you got an attack dog that's not friendly? Is that what you're admitting? Okay, sure. The reality is, he says, in practice, what it does is it lays the groundwork so that the boundaries are clearly defined. When you want a marriage where the boundaries are clearly defined, when you want a marriage that outlines the expectations in that marriage.
Well, that's what we used to have. We used to have marriage was a commitment, and everyone understood the scaffolding. Mm-hmm. They understood the boundaries. Nowadays, so many women want traditional men who have to stay in their lane, but aren't willing to be traditional women. They aren't even willing to give themselves boundaries, or they get married and think, that's it, we're done. A couple things. One, I always maintain that if you put as much effort into your marriage as you do your Facebook, Pinterest-worthy wedding, you wouldn't get divorced so quick. I think my marriage to Eric cost me maybe $150, and most of that was the marriage certificate. I wore a shirt I bought at JCPenney's and some shoes that I bought at JCPenney's, which I worked there at the time, so I got employee discount. I wore a skirt that was the bottom heirloom. It was my something old. It was the bottom half of my Aunt Martha's ivory prom dress from the 70s. My hair was up in one of the claw clips, and my mom bought a corsage. I didn't have to buy it. And we went to the Justice of the Peace. I would have taken him with nothing. We were both poor than church mice. And now we have a wonderful life. But I still had to take him with nothing. We reused my engagement ring as the wedding ring because we couldn't afford a wedding band. And I wasn't going to make him pay for it anyway. He was not in basic training anymore. He was in occupational training when we got married. Mm-hmm. And then I see so many women who, and I've been saying this for a long time, they think that marriage is the stopping point. After they get married, they don't have to try anymore. I'm like, no, that's not how that works. Marriage is a big step, but it is not the finish line. No. Dying old with a lovely, long-lived, happy life with lots of memories and getting buried next to each other, that's the end goal. Yep. And so many times I see women, they get married and they have kids and they become full-time mothers and they stop being wives. But they still expect their husbands, because remember those defined roles we were just talking about? They still expect their husbands to be fathers and husbands, but they're only willing to put in mom energy, not wife energy. And because they put in mom energy, they end up mothering their husband. And then they resent him because I have to mother him. No, Samantha, you don't. You can put that weight down. You don't have to mother him. Well, yes, because if I don't mother him, then nothing gets done. Then nothing gets done.
You're naughty.
Then if you, and not only that, but if a man doesn't want you to mother him, mm-hmm. he has a mother. He doesn't want his wife to be his mother. This conception that this idea that men want you to be their mother. They don't. They really, really don't.
Isn't that, okay, so in the military, we talk about leadership being dichotomous, right? Where you have all of these interests that are competing interests, but you have to balance because you got to fulfill both, right? Having a family and having a marriage and having the relationship with the kids and everything else and the job, that's dichotomous. So you have all of these competing interests come in, right? And you got to balance them all. You have to strike the balance. Sometimes, you know, it's kind of like you have those people that I've watched, I can't tell you how many videos on this, is where a husband and a wife are at the table. And she says, after 65 years of marriage, I needed him to come to the table. And I had to say, I only have 10%. I need you to bring the other 90. And the thing is, on that particular day, some stuff never got done, now did it? But there's always tomorrow. I think that's the beauty of it, because a lot of people don't understand combat. I'll tell you, clever girl, I don't think understood combat. So when you get into a combat zone and you're enlisted and you're on the front lines, those folks, they're not fighting for some government ideology. They're fighting for the man and woman to the right and to the left of them to ensure that they stay alive.
See, I've heard you fight for the woman, the man and the woman on your left and right, and the family you left behind.
Yes, absolutely. You don't fight for some political ideology that are soldiers instruments of policy? Absolutely. But when they look at the policy themselves, they don't really care. That's not something that they're interested in. They're getting paid to do a job and they're going to do it. And it's really interesting how all of it plays out, right? The reality, though, it goes back to, I'm doing this for my family. I'm doing this for the ones I love. Like, I'm not here to tell you, you know, you my worst enemy. You know what? I don't know you from Adam. So that's the other thing that, I don't know. It kind of is interesting to me that when you put so much of that together, how strong those bonds really, really, really build and grow on each other. And it's almost concrete and then cemented in. It's almost welded together. And at that point, no wonder why divorce is so awful. You're breaking those welds that could run really deep.
Interestingly enough, since we're talking about military, do you know that in the original translation of the Bible, which I don't believe in the divinity of the book, but it has some good historical context. Mm-hmm. And this is something that everyone loves to talk about. They always get it wrong. The word submit in the context of the wife submitting to the husband is a Greek word that I can't pronounce, but it means submit. It's a military term. It's submit in the same way that a soldier submits to their lieutenant or their commanding officer. So the husband is the commanding officer that forges ahead, and the soldier's job is to guard their back so that no one cannot come up behind them. And together you forge through life.
Right.
Like it's battle.
That's how it's supposed to be.
That's how it's supposed to be. So when I say I submit to my husband, that's what I mean. He leads us, I guard his back. Like a if you see wolves, the male wolf will growl. The female wolf looks like she's cowering under him. What she's doing is protecting his throat so that the rival cannot bite them, because that's where, if you want to kill a wolf, that's what you do. You grab them, or any animal, you grab them by the throat and you fling them out. So you see all of these pictures of wolves in the wild when they were studying bringing wolves back to Yellowstone. They would see the male, I'm trying to ignore that, the male wolf fighting off a rival, and you'd see the female, his mate, under his neck. And it looks like she's cowering. What she's doing is she's protecting his throat so that he can't be hurt. They do it with bears too. And
they do it with mares too. Yeah. Okay.
So that's what it's supposed to mean. And everyone always gets it wrong because it's a translation of a translation of a translation. Things get lost in translation. And because they have
enough, it gets really bad.
And then they have confused serve, voluntary service, like you voluntarily protect and serve in the military or in the police force, to mean subservient, which is not how it goes. I protect my husband, he protects me. I protect his home, I protect his peace, he comes home. I told him this the other day. I said that I'm not what is it? Do I bring calm to your life? He goes, no, you're absolutely nuts. And I go, no, not am I crazy? I know I'm nuttier than squirrel poo. In our relationship, is our relationship difficult? He goes, no, it's easy. I go, ha, I win.
Yeah, you're right on the money. I think you're 100% correct.
And so we have these women who confuse, back to the misandry thing, and the misogyny thing, they confuse privileges with rights. That's a big one.
Mm-hmm.
They think that because women can't do this, therefore it must be misogyny, or it must be discrimination, or it must be sexism.
Right.
Never mind. There might be actually legitimate reasons why women can't or shouldn't do certain things.
Mm-hmm.
And they're so eager to be oppressed, like they think our grandmothers were. I hate to break it to you, but my grandmother was born in 1917, lived through the Second World War and the Great Depression, and she could probably beat to death some of these modern feminists now, just with the things she knew how to do. Even Queen Elizabeth, who was the queen, worked on jeeps as a mechanic in the Second World War.
Yeah, and
so this idea.
So you remember our good friend Jesse?
Mm-hmm.
You remember how he's 6'5", 300 pounds, big dude, right? So he had his grandmother was this tiny, tiny little thing, like 4'11", maybe 100 pounds soaking wet. She was the only one that could fit into the wings of airplanes during World War II to buck rivet those airplane wings. Wow. So for people to tell us that, wow, I had my great grandmother, 6'1". She had these big old hips, and she'd put her hands on them, and she'd look at you, and you go, you never ever wanted to be grabbed by her because you better be faster, because if she got you, you were going to get it. They're just tough as nails, and people don't understand that, and they think they got it rough these days. You kind of like going back to your kids if you shut off the Wi-Fi, right? Mm-hmm. What'd you do?
Oh my God!
Wait, kid, you didn't grow up when we didn't have it at all.
You will never understand the struggle of having to go to the bathroom and get a snack before the commercial was done.
Right? Or
waiting an entire week for the next episode rather than just, are you still watching? Yes. Mm-hmm.
And the other thing is the other interesting part to that whole equation is dial-up.
Nobody be on the phone. I gotta pay a bill.
And it'd take like 10 minutes to do. Now it's like 30 seconds.
I remember. So like I said, my one of my grandmothers was born in 1917. The other one was born in the 20s, but she was a draftswoman at Los Alamos. And my grandfather worked at Los Alamos. He worked on the bombs. Mm-hmm. That's my family's claim to fame. Their life was difficult. And
Steve.
Squeeze.
Houston, you're right. You're right.
Yes, that is absolutely true. And it's like the women who scream, I'm a strong, independent woman. And I'm like, congratulations, you're an adult. It's called being an adult. You're an adult. You pay all your bills. It's called being an adult. If a man were to scream about, I'm a strong, independent man, everyone would go, and? I think there's a Chris Rock skit where he's talking about dads and deadbeats. It's like, I take care of my kids. You're supposed to. You're supposed to take care of your kids. That's not a brag when you're supposed to do it. So now we have this unique situation where women are manufacturing misogyny and using it to justify actual misandry. So we have manufactured misogyny, which isn't really misogyny. More often than not, it's just holding women accountable. If I try and like what Clever Girl was saying, if I try and hold women accountable, I get called a pick-me. You're doing this for the validation. You're trying to look good to men. I was like, look, if I wanted to really, sell myself to men, I would have a OnlyFans, not a men's activist page. I would not be sending letters to senators if I really wanted male attention.
That boggles my mind in so many ways. And the other part of that is I think we're setting everyone up for failure societally when we're basically giving into this vice. You know what I mean? Oh, Lord.
Only nuts.
Oh, my. So, but societally speaking, I look at
what is the good? This is what I always ask feminists. What good are you doing to women to keep women so afraid? Because that's what you're doing. You're manufacturing fear, right? You've made a whole bunch of women scared to death of men with the whole man versus bear thing.
A shit ton of credibility. You know what I mean?
Look at how much good you could be doing if you were not trying to perpetuate this gender war that is harming everyone.
Not only are they perpetuating the gender war, they're perpetuating this notion that DV happens at an alarming rate. But mind you, statistically speaking, DV, as defined as under assault, only occurs, well, and it depends if it's assault and battery, depending on the state you're in. It happens only in 5 to 7% of these cases. But yet in Iowa, over a third of the cases that they file some sort of domestic violence on, it doesn't compute. So when we look at like the stats on all of these things, we know for a fact that usually women are the aggressor. Usually.
I did the math on that. It's 70 women are the sole aggressor and instigator it's half and half. 50% of DV is reciprocal, about 50% is non-reciprocal. Non-reciprocal women initiate and are the sole aggressor 70% of the time, and in the where it's two people and they can't tell, women start it 25% of the time, men start it 25% of the time, and the other percent amount they can't tell, or no, 20. So they can't tell. There's some part of it when the reciprocal that they can't figure out who started it. But if you add those up, yes, women initiate like 47.5 or 6%.
But when you examine, okay, so what I loved about same-sex marriages is what we discovered is when you had lesbian relationships, it was 73% of those that ended in divorce that almost exclusively had like exceeding amounts of domestic violence. Then you compare the heterosexual accounts, which was 54% of divorce, which it was like there were allegations of domestic violence, but it happened like at 23 to 28% were the allegations. There was no way to substantiate it. Then you examine gay males, and it was at 23% was the divorce rate.
With almost no
violence.
It's almost like men aren't the problem. And so the last time I brought that up in an argument, they said, well, no, it says, because I brought up that same-sex female relationships have the highest rates of DV. Like, no, that's over their lifetime. No, it's not. It says on the thing, in their relationship with a female, it says so. It's not over their life. It's not saying that when they were in a relationship with a male, they were beaten. It's in the same-sex relationship. It says so in black and white, right there.
400% cut in domestic violence on 50-50 shared parenting.
I'm willing to bet that's because there's a whole bunch of reports that don't have anything to do with it.
Get this. So those are all the allegations that have dropped. When they examined the records that came out of Kentucky, they examined the records that came out of Spain, and they examined the records that came out of Arkansas. All of them consistently showed a 400% drop in domestic violence allegations, and founded child abuse was cut in half. Okay, so if you were to really pick that apart, you could infer or imply a few things from that, right? Mm-hmm. So the biggest thing is that we found. Our suspicion is just because of the nature of divorce and the heated things that go on and the allegations that happen. Well, if she's going to accuse me of it, I might as well just do it, right? Did you know that the violence actually happens after the order's been put into place? Over 90% of those. Over 90%. That's when the violence takes place. Okay, let's back this off. Is it still appropriate? No.
No.
But that's where you do something unreasonable and you make a reasonable man really unreasonable, not excusing the behavior, but that's what happens. Okay. Here's the other interesting component to this. We cut child abuse in half. But why is that? Well, guess what our statistics say? The number one child abuser is mom. And the number two child abuser is mom's new boyfriend. Why do we think that is? Is it because mom's new boyfriend is an awful piece of crap? No. It's actually because mom and mom's new boyfriend have that kid most of the time, and she's overwhelmed. That's why 50-50 is really important here. And it's just solidifying everything that we're saying. You know what? If you start baby to adult, I will tell you, I changed 90+% of the diapers of boys, all of them. You go straight through to adult. My job is to woo them away from mom, and my job is to prepare them for adulthood. I'll tell you this, when they want something, if they want something material, they'll go to mom. If they want something like done, or if they want to know how to do something, or they want to know how to fix something, they come to me. And that's the big thing here. So is it misogyny? Is it misandry?
Or do we just have disparities because men and women are different?
Oh, there's a concept. There's a novel concept that works.
If it walks like a duck and quacks like a duck, it'll get us banned from TikTok.
Good thing we don't have TikTok today.
No, we don't.
You know what? It is 4:23, and you know we've gone the whole show without saying hit the like button.
We have.
We have. So go ahead and hit that like button. Get it going.
Like, subscribe.
Yeah. Because we have not been on it. Dan's not here. Oops. I just not thought of it. It was like, uh-oh.
When the bald man is away, the other sort of bald man and the woman will play. When the cat's away, the mice will play. Does that make us the mice?
Yeah. And I mean, we're about like squirrels anyway, so what's the matter? You just snorted.
I did.
So it's really interesting how it all plays out. I mean, really and truthfully, all of this stuff is intertwined. And I think when you boil it down, it's just a matter of the golden rule. Treat people as you want to be treated. Don't be an asshole. Don't be a dick. Treat people good. If you can do that, they'll treat you good.
Like with the argument that clever girl was making when she said teach men not to rape. I have so many problems with that because it goes back to treat people like you want to be treated.
Mm-hmm.
And truly bad people that commit those kind of crimes, don't care. So that the whole men need to hold men accountable. They do. And the bad men, when they catch them, are held accountable. But here's the thing about bad men. They don't typically surround themselves with good men because they know that if they do, they'll be held accountable. And shitty people don't like accountability.
Yes. Jordan Peterson talks at length about that because it's funny. Set the politics aside. If you don't like him, I don't give a shit. But I'll tell you what he does do right is he certainly does point out the research. He certainly does point out the psychology. We know that when psychopaths reach a critical number of 5%, that's when we have so much chaos in society that's where big issues happen. And that's when our society is that's the critical mass point where we start to beat those psychopaths back. Now, what's interesting is social media and the keyboard warrior mentality, right? Where they come in and they're anonymous or they can't be held accountable for their words because you can't trace them, right? That's the interesting part because that's where psychopaths and sociopaths really flourish because they can cause chaos and you got no way to hold them accountable.
The irony with that, however, though, is the anonymity that you get online is starting to backfire because it has given them a false sense of confidence, and now they're going out in the real world and showing their true colors.
Oh yeah,
and you can see them.
Right. Absolutely. I think that's what's happening with the feminist movement, and I think that's the other part of it that you're losing ground at an alarming rate by being that unreasonable and by making false allegations and ruining your credibility as a group. So that when a woman who has legitimate domestic violence going on, she can't get the help she needs. Or we get a court case on it going right now where it's like she needs help. And because of the reputation that's been ruined, the judge is being really, really hypercritical.
I've caught myself doing it before. We'll all hear, because I hear so many women who lie. Mm-hmm. I have both for domestic violence and rape. I have met more women who have lied about it than have actually experienced it.
Yes.
And because of that, if a woman tells me she's either been raped or beaten, I almost always go, "Have you?" Like I'm critical of it, despite being a victim myself, because I've heard so many people lie about it. Mm-hmm. They're like, "Well, you're a victim yourself. You should believe it." I said, "No, because I am a victim myself. My credibility was freaking ruined because of all the people that lied about it." And then as an adult woman in victim spaces, a real victim can spot a fake victim faster than anything. I have spotted more fake victims in real victim spaces than I have ever actually found other real victims.
Right.
And so, yes, I would almost say that I am more critical of my sex because so many members of my sex lie. Mm-hmm. I am more willing to believe a man because most of them won't even speak out about it at all. So I know that if you're speaking out about it, it has to be really bad or you're just brave. But this idea that, because honestly, I've seen so many people lie about it that I'm always very cautious. And I wish I weren't. But I've trusted before and been very, very wrong. So it's the boy who cried wolf.
Mm-hmm. Country, you make an interesting point. You make a very interesting point with that. It does appear that we need to make chaos where there is none.
Because were you just saying earlier that women get divorces because they're bored? So so many men have made women's life so much easier by creating all of these electronics to do the work, the labor for us, that now women are sitting at home bored and they're asking for divorce.
Thank you, country. I appreciate that very much. And you're right, Steve, 90% plus do not report. But it brings us to the end of the show.
It does. Wow.
That went quick.
That went quick.
A little bit of excitement and a little bit of chaos.
A little bit of chaos can be good, but not a lot of it.
Well, I suppose.
All right, guys, that was our show. Next week, Dan is back. Curtis will be back with us behind the scenes, but I'll have my other bald man, or my other bald man, because Mr. Squirrely has a full head of hair. Mr. Squirrely calls you my boyfriend from Iowa.
Oh, geez.
Anyway, guys, bye. We'll see y'all later.